Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. I'm Daniel Torres. If this is
Welcome
the first time
to
you
the
tune in,
FMCG
you'll want to know
Guys,
that this is
the
the
podcast
show
that dives into the innovation,
in
strategy,
consumer goods
and
retail
trends
in Europe
shaping
and
consumer
beyond.
goods and
That's our
retail
introduction.
in
Yes,
Europe
actually,
and
we're
beyond.
now over 190 episodes in, so do go into our website or your favorite podcast platform to entertain yourself and be educated with some of the industry's top voices. Also, if you enjoy our show, please leave us a review. That would be amazing and really helpful to basically help us get to more people in the industry. And remember, we are part of a family of podcasts, which is headed by our friends, the CPG guys in the US. So tune into their show, 400 plus episodes in, to learn all about what's happening in consumer goods at the other side of the Atlantic. Also, we are on LinkedIn. That's our main social media platform, 16,000 plus followers there and counting. So remember to follow us there to keep up to date on our latest. And accompanied today by my dear co-host, Efrain Rosario. Hey, Efrain, how are you?
Good, Daniel. Nice to be with you as always.
How's things in Amsterdam?
It's good. I had a bit of a challenge or an issue with my stove in my apartment. So that made for an interesting Monday morning with my service repairman.
Interesting. A stove. So you're talking about large appliances, aren't you?
I am, and I will say what was really interesting was that this is a gentleman who repaired it that had worked in this for 50 years. So he was basically educating me on like the different kinds of models and like the different things and what was actually wrong in terms of like fixing it. So it was an education. So it was I don't think I'm ready to repair a stove anytime soon, but let's say I know more than I did a week ago.
Well, that's the thing. No, I think that the great thing of working in consumer goods is that you have all these categories, right? So you have like food, beverages, laundry, cosmetics, and you also have like something completely different, like large appliances, which is still a consumer good. But I mean, I love large appliances since I was a kid. I've always liked going into the stores and looking at all the fridges and washing machines and so on. And I love it because it's a very different type of purchase, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's something that everybody can relate to as well, right? I mean, I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody who hasn't come into contact with a large household appliance like a stove or a refrigerator in their probably in the last day, if not in the last half day.
Yeah, I always find it interesting to go to people's houses and see what fridge they have, I have to say. When I
Ah,
was a kid, I also actually went and opened them even. Now I hold myself back.
well, I have to remember that if I ever have you over to make sure that I have only the top notch appliances, then I make sure my refrigerator is clean.
Exactly. And what a coincidence that today we have the marketing director for one of the big uh, large appliances group. So it's the marketing director for Siemens home appliances at the BSH group, Christin Schillo. Hey, Christine, how are you?
Daniel, thanks. I'm fine and happy to be here. And I hope, Efren, you had a good experience with your stove so far, and it's on the right brand side of things. Let's put it that way.
I will say we can talk after the episode, and maybe I can upgrade to something better. We'll see.
Okay. Maybe I can find a good deal for you.
We're all for that, Christine. We're all for that. We can talk about that after the show. Don't worry, we will take that definitely. So, Christine, it's really good to see you again. We met in Cannes. How's your summer been? How are you after, what is it now, 3 months already? Goodness.
Yes, I mean, Cannes feels already like ages ago, right? But overall, I think, yes, I personally had a great summer. I'm a big sports fan, and then with the Euro Cup, Olympics, and everything going on, I had a very decent summertime. And like last weekend, I joined one of the last adult shows here in Munich. So I had a lot of fun in the last couple of weeks.
Nice. Awesome. So, Christine, for the audience to get to know you a little bit better, can you tell us a bit about your role? Because looking at your LinkedIn, I said marketing director, but I know that it's more than that. So if you can tell us a bit about your role at BSH and a bit also about the company, because you're managing Siemens, but the BSH, there's a lot of more brands in there.
Yes, sure. I mean, BSH as a name is usually not as known, let's say, as Unilevers or Coke of this world. So it stands for Bosch Siemens Home Appliances. So we are one of the leading home appliance companies in the world with like 15 billion turnover a year, around about, I think, 60,000 employees worldwide. So we are a big player, and we feature a couple of different brands. So we have Bosch, then we have Siemens Home Appliance as our big global brands, let's say. But then we do also have other brands like Thermador in the US or Gaggenau as our luxury brand. So quite a huge portfolio, and we really cover the markets from North America all the way down to China. Now, in my role, I'm 6 years with BSH, and right now I'm heading the global Siemens Home Appliances communication team. Basically, okay, what is our brand positioning, our equity, and how do we want to bring this to life with communication assets, etc. But as well, I'm heading the newly created Center of Excellence for Social Media, which works across brands. And the idea is that we try to standardize and centralize as much as we can in the social environment, let's say, to get a better grip in the social community with our brands, and to ease the life of our countries, because playing in social media is more and more a challenge.
Absolutely, and Christin, it's great to meet you, and I can tell you that I'm a proud customer. So I have a Thermador in my U.S. house. So it's great to learn more about the brand and the company as well. But before we do that, I'd love to just hear a little bit more about your background, because it's a really fascinating background. And if somebody were to look at your LinkedIn profile, there's a lot of stories to be told in that background. So we'd just love to share that with our audience.
Sure. I mean, personally, I feel it's pretty standard, but I studied general like economics, was focused on marketing. I did an internship in India as a student, and actually it was my first connection to the Siemens brand, because it was with Siemens Health back then. Most of my friends went back then to fancy places like Australia or US, but I said, well, it's all too similar to Germany. I want to experience something really different. So I ended up spending 7 months in Mumbai, which was really a challenge for me, being 25, first time.
I have to say, one of my favorite cities. So
yes, no, I also love it, but I think India is a place where most people either you love it or you hate it. And the first 2 weeks, I was a little bit like, okay, I need to go back to the airport. But then I enjoyed it. Then when I was done with studying, I started at Procter & Gamble back then in Kronberg with the brand Braun, where still I think the overall engineering and R&D department sits. And then I moved to Geneva, to the European headquarter of Procter, right, and did a couple of global regional roles there for fragrance back then, Braun again. And then I moved back to Frankfurt, where I worked then for Gillette and Venus for the DACH region. Then after 10 years, it was like, okay, you should need to go back to Geneva. But I felt I had spent my time in Geneva, so I was looking a little bit for an alternative. And also, as I have been working then in global, regional, local, I felt a little bit I had experienced the whole chain, let's say, in P&G. So I wanted to bring in my expertise in a new company, but as well also broaden my horizon further. And that's how I ended up with BSH, because I do have a certain passion, let's say, for German heritage brands. So in that sense, I'm a little bit a patriot, that I would always buy Adidas over Nike, or always a German car over an Asian car or something. So that made me come to Munich, which as well was also a reason, because Munich is just a beautiful city to live in.
And I know that between Procter & Gamble, which I know a lot of Procter & Gamble alumni, and I know that leaving Procter & Gamble is like a big deal. I don't know, it's like quitting a partner, basically.
Yes.
And I know that between Procter & Gamble and BSH, you actually took a sabbatical for a few months. What made you,
yes.
What made you take that decision, and how did it go? What did you do?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it was a little bit like a divorce, right? I mean, I've spent there 10 years. The majority still of my friends today is from my P&G times.
Wow.
So I decided that I need to take a break in between. I didn't want to leave Friday, the office, and start on Monday with a new company. And also, I mean, I started working right away after I was done with my diploma. So I thought, okay, maybe this is now the time where I can, spend a little bit more time on my hobbies, travel, and so on. So I used the time to do the online digital master program, but as well traveling mainly in Asia, where I also spent a couple of weeks in an animal rescue farm. So where they kind of try to pimp up again elephants coming out of not so proper zoos, let's say, which was an extremely heart-opening, touching, and intense experience. Because I think all of us, right, we spend our whole day in Zoom team meetings, PowerPoint, Words, and so on. It was just great to do something, let's say, physically, right? I mean, I was cutting like 20 kilos of pineapple every day to feed the elephant, but you had a real result in your hand. And you also could see that the elephants are happy that finally they also get a good treatment. So that was really an interesting experience, and also helped me to kind of restart, to refresh my brain, remove Proctor, and be open and ready for a new challenge.
Yeah, no, I love that. And as somebody who's I didn't spend anywhere near as much time as you did at the rescue camp. I've been to some of those kinds of camps in Thailand and Laos, and they're truly life changing when you can be in that close proximity to this an animal as majestic and as big as those elephants. It's something that it's a once in a lifetime kind of thing for a lot of people. So then fast forwarding post sabbatical and you starting with BSH. I'm curious to understand what is it that attracted you to BSH? Like, what is it that drew you there? Like, as Daniel said, leaving your partner at P&G behind to take on this new challenge with and you've already alluded to one thing, which is the heritage of the company. But I'd love to hear what else was part of that decision for you.
Well, I mean, as it's one hand is the heritage. The other thing I have to say is the city, because Munich is a little bit more beautiful than Geneva or Frankfurt.
I agree on Frankfurt. People may send me messages, but I agree on Frankfurt.
So I'm 20 years a member with the FC Bayern Munich Football Club. So it was always my dream to live in the city so that I can go regular to the games. And thirdly, I felt during the interviews and when I met people here that there is so much I could also bring in that made it very interesting for me. I mean, let's be honest, most of those, let's say, more typical German companies, they're more conservative. Marketing is maybe not the first thing in their mind. I mean, also BSH, we are still quite, let's say, tech-driven, right? A lot of things just coming from the engineering side. But I do believe that now and even more in future, we need to ensure that we dial up our branding as we're playing in, let's say, more and more commodized categories, right? I mean, of course, a Bosch washing machine is better than a no-name washing machine, but ultimately a no-name washing machine will also clean your shirt. So what makes them the difference is the brand and the experience and the expectation and the connection you have to the brand. And I thought that, the tech side, boxes ticks from BSH, they didn't need me. But when it comes to, let's say, how to elevate our branding, our marketing activities, that there's something I could really bring in, while also learning, of course, new things. And the last one aspect for me is, so P&G, right, as a Wall Street company, it was also for me one trigger to go to a company which is not signed on the Wall Street, just to see a little bit the differences in terms of short-term focus maybe versus long-time focus, as we are not as much driven behind Wall Street or external stakeholders, let's say, right? So those were mainly the reasons, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing, like when you're not so exposed to the quarterly pressure of delivering returns, delivering like stock price and so on, it's a different ballpark, right? Maybe in some way, maybe you miss that accountability, but I think it has like so many advantages. It's crazy.
No. I mean, as you said, there's no perfect setup, right? Being that exposed with Wall Street also has a lot of benefits, as you say, accountability, certain speed to approach topics. But here, on the other hand, I have the feeling that we act more, long-term driven versus the quarterly reports. Doesn't mean that we don't have business pressure, right? Of course, we have targets we need to fulfill, and current situation is challenging as the markets are not as demanding anymore as they maybe have been during COVID times. But I think the game is still different versus a Wall Street company.
And we were talking before, Christine, of like FMCG, consumer, well, we have fast-moving consumer goods and the wider consumer goods area, which is what we cover. I mean, how different is like buying Ariel or Gillette? Well, Gillette is pretty regular anyway, to buying a Bosch washing machine or Siemens fridge. Like, how different is consumer electronics from FMCG, like the inner works and...
Yeah, I mean, generally, I think when we have the broad term of consumer electronics, we need to separate. I mean, there's the cool stuff, right? The TVs and the mobile phones and stuff. We are more at the dry, boring side of life with our fridges.
I think fridges are pretty cool as well, I have to say.
Let's say. But I mean, as you say, usually, of course, our purchase cycles are way longer, right? You buy a washing machine like every, let's say, average 7 years, depends a little bit by country, but the purchase cycles are very long. Usually we are playing in rather low involvement categories, right? I mean, it's not that you are in love with your dishwasher. You want the dishwasher to work perfectly, but it's not that you wake up in the morning and say, yeah, finally I can fill my dishwasher again, right? So that's also challenging from a marketing perspective, how to trigger this special feeling with our products. Then the next aspect is that usually what are the main reasons to buy? It's basically when something is broken, right? It's not that you sit on your sofa and think, oh, it's time for a new washing machine. That you start the moment your washing machine stops working. And in that moment, we need to be ready and we need to be on the radar of the consumer as a brand overall, right? But that's very hard to anticipate, let's say, right? There's also no incremental purchase in that sense, right? Because you have one washing machine, you wouldn't buy a second or a third one. And as I said in the beginning, given that we are more a tech-driven company and also I think overall our German culture, we are not a marketing company. Of course, we're talking very different budgets and different approaches, how we look at the overall topic of brand building versus the P&Gs and Unilevers of this world.
Yeah, and I think also like, how do you like with large appliances? It's a lot about like the technical specifications, right? Like, whereas in a fast-moving consumer good in the supermarket, it's more about the touch and feel in the brand. So what about that part?
Yeah, I mean, that's also a challenge, right? I mean, usually, if I would ask you to explain me how exactly your dishwasher works, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't be able to tell it exactly, right?
It's up in there and it makes some noise.
This is when you get at. Once you talk that
my engineers would say, "Oh my God, you don't know what's happening." It's highly complex product. So, and I said, usually people are not really engaged. It's really in the moment when something is broken. Or the other big reason is where people are actually more engaged is when you move first time into your first apartment or you build a house, right? Then you look at more holistic kitchen planning and you want to have it perfect and that it also looks very good. Those are mainly the two key purchase reasons. For kitchen building as a whole concept, I think here it's also about this, aspiration, inspiration, coming over a great design, etc. And then the technical component, of course, you need to tick the main boxes, right? It needs to be clean, it needs to be energy efficient, water sufficient, and all those kinds of things. And in those urgent replacement, how we call it, is really more be there with the right offering at the right moment of time. And then it is still a challenge, but I think in the last couple of years, we have made quite some progress to turn our, let's say, German tech language more into consumer language. And starting also innovations more from what is a consumer pain point, what is a real insight, and how do I communicate this towards the consumer? In the past, it was way more the engineers coming and saying, here's a new feature. Now go and make a fancy picture and sell it. But I think especially the Asian competitors have shown us that we also need to be way more insight-driven and consumer-focused, and we have done or still doing a lot of steps in this direction.
So Christin, and I'm really curious to get your perspective, both with somebody with a P&G pedigree like you have, but also given your role as, like, to say, that voice of the consumer or the voice of the marketing department in a very tech-oriented company. How has marketing evolved over the past few years? Given that you're now seeing it, you've seen it through the FMCG lens, but as Daniel mentioned, that broader consumer goods, i.e., electronics, lens.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two sides of the coin for me. I mean, on the one hand, it has, of course, evolved with all the new technology possibilities, right? And the overall digital landscape. There's so much content, so many channels, apps, etc. out there, while the attention span of consumers is going down, 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 right? But still, we're all looking into how can we get more content out faster, especially now also with AI. So I think that has definitely evolved, combined with way more data availability. So consumer data, right? When they're reading what and why, etc. So I think those two things have changed. But what hasn't actually changed is that for, I think, independent of any category or industry you're in, are things like really understanding your consumer, have a real insight. So the basics of marketing haven't really changed, and at least not in my view. Because if you don't have a real insight, if you are not clear on what do you want to bring across towards your consumer, what do you want to achieve, then it doesn't make a difference if you post your, let's say, nonsense in Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok, right? So therefore, the fundamentals are, for me, actually still the same. It's just that the environment we're operating on is way more cluttered, way more competition in our industry, especially coming from Asia. And the consumers, on the one hand, more demanding when it comes to product performance, but as well for things like what is the purpose of a company? What is their real reason to be there? What's their view on certain society or political issues and those kind of things, right? And those are challenging topics for us. I mean, in a industry like home appliance, we are maybe not the natural player to talk about purpose or politics or something like that, right? But still, you need to have a view in order to ensure that you attract also the younger generations. And even if they don't buy us today, so we have a lot of discussion on Gen Z in our company, right? Because there's quite a lot of people say, well, they will not buy us today. Yeah, that's fair, but they will buy us tomorrow, and they have a heavy influence on the parents. So I need to ensure that I'm somewhat on their radar already today, because otherwise my business will shrink quite significantly in the next couple of years.
No, totally. Yeah, that's the thing, no? Like, and it's complex, right? Because the messaging that you send to the people that are gonna spend more money today may be very different to the messaging that you're gonna send to people that will spend money tomorrow, no?
Yes. And then on top, I think, I mean, there are many companies out there in our industry, right? And if you go to a shop and you want to buy a new fridge or a washing machine, and then you have 10 devices in front of you, they all look more or less the same, if we are honest. I mean, don't tell this my designer. They will say, are you crazy? Of course, we have a very precise design language. Yeah, that's true. But still, if you are as a normal consumer in a media markt or a Corte Inglés or whatever, you have 10 white boxes and they're called washing machines, right? So how can I get here this emotional connection that people are willing to pay a little bit more for a brand like Bosch, or even a little bit more for a brand like Siemens home appliances?
So I guess the question is obliged. How do you create that emotional connection?
Yeah, that's, I mean, one of the key topics here for us, right? And I think one area is that we need to be more visible where the consumers are in terms of media consumption, right? And that's why we do have this strong focus now on social media. And it's not about, at least not in step one, about selling our products. Because, I mean, if your washing machine is breaking, then it's not that you go right away to Instagram, right? You usually either you go to Google or right away to Amazon to see who has the best ratings and so on. But for us, the goal is that we ensure we stay at least somewhat on their mindset to keep the mental availability and to offer certain attractive, relevant content they can associate with that when this moment is, they have us in mind. But as you say, it's very hard for us to find those right topics. I mean, when you look at our product categories, the one which is emotionally most relevant, I would say, is cooking, right? I mean, for a lot of people, cooking is a hobby, a passion, but there's so many other players out there in the area of cooking. So I don't need to be another one posting a recipe, right? There are other, I don't know, journalists, magazines, creators, influencers you would go for in the first step when you look for a recipe, and not necessarily to Bosch or Siemens. So we really need to have this right mix of, let's say, base content, of ticking the boxes for having some tips, tricks, recipe stuff, but what is then the cherry on the cake, which creates a little bit more this emotional trigger. And honestly, we haven't found it yet in all cases. We also trying to find our way through on platforms like TikTok, which is for, I think, a more German conservative company, a quite challenging platform. On the one hand, the full amount of content you need, but as well to let your brand a little bit go, right? I mean, we have 500 pages of corporate design guidelines. The logo needs to be here, kind of thing. If I go to a content creator at TikTok and say, you need to consider all of this, it's not gonna work, right? So, and I think that's at the moment the way we're in to navigate through how much can we let our brands go, but still protect the essence of our brands.
Yeah, I would say it's pretty much impossible to distill a 500-page design manual into a 5-second post on TikTok. Yeah,
Yeah.
If somebody can do that, then kudos to them. But yeah, very, very hard.
Yeah, but we have a similar discussion, for instance, on Gen AI at the moment, right? Where we say it's very hard in AI, with AI tools, to create product visuals which are 100% accurate. Because then sometimes the shadow of the button is not 100% perfect. Fine, I get that if I have a, I don't know, 5 square meters billboard, then it needs to be really 100% perfect. But in a 5-second reel on Instagram, nobody will notice if the color of this little button is 100% according to the design guidelines, right? So, and that's where, a lot of discussions are happening between here, in our case, design, corporate communication, brand people, while then the board is saying, why are you so slow? Hurry up, let's use AI.
Well, I would say that you've kind of touched on a really interesting point that I think a lot of people in the industry are wrestling with, which is how do you balance that creativity and precision, right? And how do you find the right balance? And like you said, in different formats and different content, that percentage between the two may be different, right? In terms of what you're doing on social media, what you may be doing in terms of like a press release, or what you do in terms of like the manuals that come with the equipment itself. So it's not always one balance, but it's finding the right balance for that moment.
Yeah. And I think that links back to what we discussed before. What has changed in marketing is the pure complexity, right? The amount of content, the amount of channels, and the amount of tools now also with Gen AI you have on hand to navigate your way through where do I need to be precise, where can I let it go a little bit, and where do I focus actually on, right? We have hundreds of different social media accounts across all our brands. I would say the majority is not in a best shape because we lack then resources, content, etc. Right? So where do I draw the line and say, okay, we need to focus more in order to become then really also better and more efficient?
And are there any like specific ways that you're introducing AI in your day-to-day marketing, social media activations?
Well, I mean, it's of course a hot topic here as well, right? Even though I have to say also from a BSH perspective, it's now the hot kid in the town, but it has been there already a long time, right? I think now it's more about the accessibility, that everyone can use it with ChatGPT and other tools being out there. But we do have a huge IT department, and AI has played a role there before, as well in our production sites and so on. At the moment, it's more, I think, for me, there's 3 aspects. One thing is, let's say, upscaling people. So I encourage my people, even if you don't work directly with AI, if you think you will long-term stay in marketing, you need to get your hands dirty and dig into the topic, because it will not go away. You need to skill up. The second topic is more, let's say, a cultural change. I'm not sure how it's in other countries, but here, Germans, a bit more traditional, conservative, there's also quite a few people who are a little bit afraid about the new technology. What does it mean to my job, my role? What does it mean for the overall society, and so on? And then on the other hand, you have those enthusiasts, or our, let's say, the boards in many companies, who see, oh, this will be a big cost saving, where I believe there is a lot of potential, but you need to invest first in your people, in the tools, and so on. So basically what we're doing at the moment is we look at our entire marketing value chain, and where do we have challenges right now, be it it's too expensive or we are too slow or whatever the reason is, and look then, okay, could AI help here, yes or no? Because AI is also not the solution to everything, right? So therefore, yeah, we pick kind of use cases. We screen the market constantly. I mean, it's like mushrooms, right? Every day new companies coming out. And then we kind of see a little bit, okay, let's do a little pilot in order to scale it then with a positive outcome, hopefully up. There are a couple of things where we use it already quite frequently, I would say, in terms of content creation for website. So base content, let's say, base imagery, analytics stuff, and so on. So I think we are actually already advanced. I mean, we are, of course, not Google or Microsoft. But I have been lately to a lot of AI events and talking to a lot of other companies. I would say we're actually pretty good in the way we approach it, the way what we explore. So I feel actually quite confident that this will also help us in driving a certain competitive edge, because that's the other challenge, right? If everyone is using the same tools, how do you ensure that there's still a competitive edge for your brand Bosch or your Siemens home appliances? And that's one of the key questions we're asking ourselves more or less every day.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love how you mentioned that, part of the remit around AI for those of us in marketing is around finding the right use cases to really kind of that AI can go and help solve, as opposed to saying, I'm going to go do AI. I mean, if you do that, then you're going to boil the ocean, as we like to say sometimes in the US.
Yeah, no, that's true. And for me, I think in step one, it's for me really a great enabler when it comes to efficiency and productivity. But from a pure, let's say, brand builder perspective, I still do believe, at least with the tools we have now on hand, the real creativity, the real insights are still coming from human beings. Mm-hmm. Right? This human notion, it's not yet there.
No, because I think it's to me, in my mind, that is rooted in our human curiosity. And while we can provide information to train our AI models, the curiosity is something that still primarily, I would say, almost 100% relies on humans. So that's at least my perspective. So
no, I agree. And I have to say that was also, I think, one of the key topics in Cannes, where it was, I mean, of course, all advertisers would say we still need them because it's their business. But I think no matter to whom you have talked there, they all would say, at least status today, there is still this human hand needed because of curiosity, emotions, etc. AI can enable the execution of new ideas in a faster, more productive way, and so on. But this kind of real creativity is not coming from AI. And actually, I mean, we had just a few days ago, we did some analytics work with AI. And of course, it's great to look at a huge amount of data and come out with a kind of, okay, this is the findings, that's the index, and so on. But it cannot really bring then a insight, right? That's still what we need to do. And I do believe that this also still will take quite a while until AI can take this one over.
Yeah, 100%.
We won't be bored, that's for sure. And Christine, one of the topics that's kind of recurrent on this podcast is like you're you're sitting in headquarters global, and then there's local business units. that probably according to them are the ones that actually do the business and get it done. How do you balance that global approach to that local? And also, yeah, when it comes to like social media and so on, every country has its really nuances where you compare like the people that how people use social media in France or Italy to Spain, they look pretty different.
No, I mean, generally BSH is rather decentralized organization, so most of the power sits with the countries. So our global role is really generally more setting standards, frameworks, guidelines, and the overall, let's say, strategic direction. Nevertheless, I think for me, this whole global versus local is actually for me rather a cultural question. And I had the same at P&G, right? It's always this kind of, oh, those stupid people in the ivory tower kind of story. For me, it's really, my key question is always, how can we together do something useful for the company or the specific project or topic we are on, no matter if you're local, regional, or global. Now, for me personally, that as I have been working on global, regional, local side, and I have been also in a lot of customer meetings with Amazon, DM, Media Saturn, and I got my flap in the face from a customer. I usually have a good relationship with countries because I feel I understand their language. And I always try to be on their eye level and rather come to, let's see how I can help you to achieve something better together, and not coming here as I'm the smarty from the headquarter and tell you now how the world is going. Right? So that's one thing. On social media in particular, yes, of course, there are cultural differences in terms of consumption, but also the content. On the other hand, the algorithm of Instagram is in France the same than in Italy or Nordics or US, right? So therefore, you need to find the sweet spot of where can I maybe centralize things and what needs to be done on a local side. And what we usually, or what we're trying to go into, is a little bit more, what are content themes or topics which are more or less equally relevant across the globe? And what is then the local thing you add on top? Be it, I don't know, I mean, of course, Ramadan is not as important in Germany than in Turkey, right? And you have different local influencers or other partnerships. So therefore, we're trying to go in a kind of, okay, 60% or depends a little bit of content comes from region or globe because it is equally relevant. And then the rest is the local top spin and addition and more focusing on their product specifics. So,
It's it's super interesting. I mean, I think we've had a couple of recent guests who have been similar to you in those global, regional, local roles, and what they each kind of brought and taken from those experiences into kind of then whatever the next one has been. So like, what you take from local to in a global role and then or vice versa is just it's fascinating. And I think there's a lot of people in our audience who probably in a similar kind of situation as well. So it's good to have your viewpoint on that. This has been super insightful, and I think while we'll probably have to do a separate discussion to understand Daniel's fascination with refrigerators on another time. I do want to kind of wrap up and be conscious of your time, and I want to close with a question that we ask all of our guests, and it's one that I'm really interested to hear from you because again of the diversity of your background, which is if you could go back in time and you could go give yourself one piece of advice to your younger self when you were first starting your career, so like coming out of university, maybe before you or during that internship in India, what would that one piece of advice be?
well, I mean, first of all, I mean, I started right away working. If I would be 22 now again, I would also take a break in between before working to get a little bit more sorted. Yeah, what I'm really after, let's say, right? But that back then it was more the pressure. Okay, I need a job now. I need to earn money and so on. So I would take a little bit more time to travel and to explore in order to be maybe a little bit more precise. Where to start my career. I mean, I'm honest, I applied at, I don't know, 20, 30 companies back then. right? And I ended up with Procter, which is not a bad place to be, obviously, but it could have been also something completely different because I applied, across multiple industries. So I think a little bit more taking the time and just think through what you really want to achieve in life. I would potentially do a little bit more different versus today, and using more time for traveling, because once you are in this hamster wheel of working, I mean, in Germany we have the luxury of 30 vacation days, but still it's not enough to really explore the world, let's say.
That's true. That's true. Thanks, Christine. This was very interesting. And now Ephraim and I will do the exercise of trying to summarize all the information you've given us, which we won't be able to say everything, but we'll do our best. Ephraim, what are your key takeaways?
To me, it's really fascinating to hear about leading a marketing function in a tech-oriented company. And what didn't dawn on me until we then asked and you shared with us, about the 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 advent of digital technologies and tools as part of marketing, which is that, how do those two worlds come together, right? So I mean, I think, it's just fascinating to think about how do you take the more tech oriented language and translate it to marketing, so that it's more relevant to consumers. But it's also like, vice versa. It's like, consumers are becoming much more tech oriented because of they have these devices in their hands that are like much more advanced than we did, years and years ago. So to me, that interplay between tech and marketing in a company like BSH is fascinating.
And also about the tech, a bit following what the market wants. No, I think that was also an interesting dynamic of before being engineering first, consumer second, and let's see if consumers like it. Now to see like, okay, what is actually that consumers want.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I said, people are becoming much more digitally savvy, right? I mean, if you think about Gen Z consumers who are digital natives, I mean, they're born with that gene in terms of being able to understand tech in ways that I can only fathom. So it's fascinating, like, but at the same time, it's like they're not going to read 500 pages of a manual, right? So it's like, how do you distill that into the content and the formats that they're going to engage with the brand most likely in?
Yeah, ultimately, yeah, and I think also interesting to in large appliances, it's a thing that you're going to purchase maybe once a year maximum. So as a brand, to keep to be in people's minds, you have to be where they are, no? Like, so social media, as Christine said, you have to be there, right? And you have to turn up in the right way. It's not easy.
Well, that's just it. That's the other thing I was going to mention, which is I loved when Christine, when you mentioned, that the part of the challenge as a marketer with in this category is about making that emotional connection. And how are you going to connect with consumers on, a deeper level, right? So it's like, yes, they need this appliance because it needs to perform a certain function, but at the same time, it's like, there's emotion behind it. And I loved your example of cooking, because as somebody who's a self-proclaimed foodie, it's like, yeah, you you do make some relationships with your appliances, and like I certainly feel that way about my barbecue grill, and that I love my big green egg. Shout out to them. Anyway, but I think it's that emotional connection is something that's relevant not just for this category, but for all of the FMCG and consumer goods categories.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then finally, I think interesting point on AI, which obviously Christine is investing time in and actually getting her team to upskill themselves, but still the human power of setting a vision, finding the innovation, and having that capacity will still be there, right? So
absolutely. I mean, I think we talked about it, right? Which is that there will always be a role for humanity or for humans in terms of being able to bring curiosity and ultimately insight to the process, right? I don't think that that's going to go away. At the same time, I thought it was fascinating, Christine, when you mentioned the fact that certain people may be a little bit intimidated by this new technology, and like they say, "Oh, I'm going to be replaced by it." But I think you kind of alluded to it, and I've heard it mentioned a couple other times, which is that you're not going to be replaced by the technology. You're going to be replaced by somebody who understands the technology and can use it to do their job more effectively. So that's really what you need to kind of think about in terms of the upskilling that you mentioned as well.
Exactly. So, Christine, I hope we summarized this all right. It was great to have you here.
Yes, very well summarized. I couldn't have said better. And yes, thanks for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
And let's see how the football season goes this year, because it was quite a surprise that Bayern didn't win the league last year.
Yes, still a pain in my heart.
Okay, too soon, Daniel, too soon.
No, but last year they didn't win it. So I think that this year they are. I don't know if Barcelona will win the league. I think Paris Saint-Germain will win the league. So let's see.
The final is the Champions League final is in Munich. So
one more reason to visit Munich. Aside, now that Adele is done with her tour, we have a new reason to go to Munich.
As long as it's not Real Madrid that wins the Champions League, I'm happy. Can I sign anywhere for Bayern to win it this year? I happily will. Well, thanks so much for seeing. Thanks, Efrain, and thanks to our audience. We'll see you in the next episode of the FNCG, guys. Have a great one.